All right, welcome to the latest episode of the Coleman Power Organic Fitness Podcast. I have an absolute bright spark here in front of me. We have Aoife, all the way. She's from Ireland, but she's currently based in the likes of Scotland. Right, she's a facilitator of the likes of land-based events and overall well-being. Aoife, welcome to the show.
Míle Wakes, thanks a million, Coleman. Good to be here with you, and yeah, to have this time to chat together.
We already have had literally chats in between chats that haven't been recorded. Both of us are drinking our lovely healthy beverages, and I knew before we even came on the live of the recording, I was there. Wonder what Aoife's going to be drinking. She's drinking out of her cabbage cup, and tell everybody what you're drinking out of your cabbage cup.
I have my ginger and lemon infusion here. It's a strong infusion of fruit ginger, which has been grated with yeah, lemon juice.
That is the way to do it. And I went with the simple ginger and I'm going to say fennel, which are literally forage, but not the ginger, the likes of the fennel, and put in a cup. That is it with a little bit of hot water. People are overcomplicating being healthy. And the idea is the less you, I'm going to say, think about it and go back to single ingredients, which we'll further expand on the likes of this, the better. If I want you to tell the listeners a little bit, I suppose, your background and how you're, I'm going to say, one of the main leaders in this whole land movement that I be a firm believer in, that is was literally the past, but now it's got to be the future.
Don't know if I'm a leader, but sure, I'm here anyways. And I've been on this journey a while and not so long because I'm very young in body, but I myself was actually born on the foothills of the Dublin Mountains there in Tala, and I grew up in a place with a lot of addiction, a lot of problems. I myself was, yeah, I grew up in a very difficult circumstance, and all around me, I could just feel something wasn't right. I was like, this isn't how it's meant to be, basically. And my mom, had her own addiction problems, and I was surrounded by people that were very, very sick and very, very disconnected. So from a young age, I suppose was quite spiritual. I was always seeking what is the truth, what is the truth? And I had the ability to kind of see beyond what was right in front of me. And that was difficult because I could see a lot of darkness, the darkness that was in the world and the darkness that made people sick and was the cause of the sickness that was surrounding me and that was within me at the time as well. And so that kind of brought me on a bit of a healing journey, which I suppose has never ended and continues on. And yeah, ultimately it brought me back to the land. So when I was a teenager, I was called back out into nature. At any given moment, I would go to the forest. I would go to graveyards where they would were yew trees. I would read books that was based around kind of nature-based spirituality and energy healing and all these kinds of things. And so I started to really open my awareness and consciousness to a reality and a way of living that was beyond the culture that I was being presented in Tala, which was very much a mainstream culture of, takeaways and drinking at the weekends and taking drugs and all of that shite. And I knew that wasn't for me, and I knew that wasn't the right path. So I started to carve out and find my own path, and ultimately it was the land, and that, yeah, brought me to leaving school. When I left school, I had to finish school. That was the only rule my ma had for me. I was basically allowed to do what I wanted, other than that I had to finish school. And the minute I finished school, I went traveling for months. And on that journey, I started to live outside. I started to live in caves on beaches. And I came back to Ireland and I was like, why can't I do that here? So I ended up camping all the time in Ireland. I then started living in the forest. I was 19 then. I started living in the forest. And that really was the school that I was always longing for. That was the place and the experience that was, for the first time, truly reflective of who I am and who I knew I was. So I started to, yeah, unschool myself and started to remember, like, who am I? Who is Aoife? And beyond this cultural narrative that I was given in Tala. And yeah, so I've been on that journey ever since. And I'm really just an eternal student. Like, I'm always learning things, I'm always learning new skills, and just really curious about the world, and really curious about how well can I actually be, and how healthy, yeah, it's like my health is a legacy that I'm going to give to the next generation, because basically what I inherited wasn't health. Unfortunately, my ancestors had a really hard time, and that's why my mom has addiction problems, and my dad and all sorts of different, a lot of people in our family are addicts. And so that was what I inherited. That was the generational trauma. And, I have been unraveling all of that and coming into a space of well-being. And for me, that is the greatest legacy that I could ever create and give to the next generations. And also, influence the people around me. We hear about influencers these days. We're all influencers. We're all influencing each other. And if I'm doing something, I realized that years ago when I used to smoke, right? Because I used to smoke because that was the done thing and it was normal. Everyone in my family smoked. And I realized it was when my nieces were around and I was like, would I want them to do this? And would I do this in front of them? And the answer was no. And that was the real thing for me. It was like, I'm not going to pass this on to them. I'm not going to pass the things on that were passed on to me. So yeah, it's an exciting healing journey that's often quite difficult. It's not easy. There's a lot that you have to look at, and a lot of, we're constantly being bombarded with things that are so addictive and stimulating and seductive. And it's a real path of rebellion and courage to actually walk one that, faces these addictive ways of being that are the dominant culture in the world. So anyways, I don't know if that answers your question.
That's great. And even in that, I'm going to try and unpack it just a little bit because there's loads in there. So you would have mentioned the fact that, right, that your, I'm going to say, main goal, correct me if I'm wrong, is actually to be healthy, right? To bring health into your own. Like, so you're similar to me. I would do anything to be healthy. I want to be healthier. If there was a different plant, if there was a certain country I had to live in, if there was a way you had to eat, whether it's only in between certain hours or you to eat this type of food or that type of food or a certain amount of food, I would do that because I just want for myself to be the healthiest and the happiest individual. And people that are healthier, they are happier. And is that something that you would agree with and would do similar, I'm going to say, attributes?
Yeah, so well-being is a way of life. And I think, it takes a while to actually get there because we've been so programmed to be unwell. Like the society that we live in is really unwell. And so it's actually like swimming upstream like the salmon to be well, and it's like it's not just the pill that you take or this one cold plunge or whatever it is. It's a whole holistic way of reprogramming yourself and the way that you live. And for me, it's about living with the seasons, it's about eating food that is around me and that is, wild and fresh and real. Like real food, real live vibrant food. The food from the shops is dead. The majority of it is dead, even if it's green and in, it's all in plastic packaging. But so it's kind of like a reweaving of what it is to actually be a human. And that's like through how we move. Movement is such a big important part of that. We have really changed what it is to be a human in such a short amount of time that we're always sitting down, we're eating really heavy meals, we're not actually moving. Like when I kind of tune into the deer, I'm very connected with the deer, and the deer are strong in this landscape, and the deer is one of the main meat sources that I would eat, and there's an abundance of it available here. But when I'm walking through the landscape like the deer, I'm like, oh yeah, the deer are always walking. They're always moving. And you never see a fat deer. You never see a deer that's like, Jesus, that deer is terrible, fat looking. It's obese. You know what I mean? And that's because it's always moving and it's eating the herbs and everything else. And for me, when we look at nature, that's how we can remember how to be well again. So for me, I'm just coming back into my natural state. Our natural state is well-being.
Yes, and that's exactly it. And the idea is you can eat yourself healthy. However, this is a point that we actually touched on just before we pressed recording. You can be over fed but undernourished, and that's why a lot of people have cravings. That's why the people say, "What snacks should I be currently eating?" And I'd love you to even further expand on that kind of point.
Oh, definitely. Like, I've experienced it myself because over the years I've tried lots of different food types, and I've been very confused about food in the past. There was this point where, because it was this whole vegetarian thing, and, respect to vegetarians and to anyone's life choices. But at one point I was like, what am I actually meant to be fucking eating? No, it's like there's this diet and there's that and there's fucking diet keto and there's like raw vegan and there's this, that and the other. And I was like, it doesn't really make sense for me to be like eating a raw vegan diet in Ireland now, to be honest. Like, and there's this and that, and everyone's telling you what's right and wrong. And actually, I was like, the world that we live in, it's so incredible that we have such an access to lots of different information. We live in the age of information, so you can just type something into Google and you can learn a lot of different things, and that's incredible. But at the same time, yeah, we're also bombarded with so many different things that it confuses us. So for me, when I get out onto the land and I observe what's in nature and I'm tuned into my own intuition and into my own body, I know what to eat. And at this time of year, it is lighter foods. In the winter, I was eating a diet that's heavy in venison, mostly like really strong in the old venison. Um, and a lot of, yeah, heavier foods. And now at this time of year, it's way more like greens and wild edibles and whatnot, and just a lighter diet all round.
Yeah. And I suppose leading on to it between foods and everything else, like I know that you're a massive Gael gore. Was that something that you were fluent in leaving school, or tell me a little bit more about that? Just because I myself, being dyslexic, I didn't get to. I was exempt from it in school and had to grow to go back for it. And I'm learning pieces and use cúpla focal, whether it's the likes of úl, agus ishka, tome a ri, in you, and just any kind of words that I would have running for those people that listening for running, apple, and most certainly anything else that I would have. Just, I suppose, I feel healthier when I actually speak the cúpla focal in Irish and wherever I am. And if they don't know it, it's grand. And you're great to do that. I have to say, like, well done, because you say a sentence that helps me, and then you say it in English after. And
Hmm.
I love that because I can pick up, oh, you're touching me kind of Greg Gore. And I'm like, oh yeah, great. She said that straight away. It helps me to learn a little bit from you.
Yeah, so yeah, is even lo matanga dulchis agus is gael gourmet cénte ach tá McFolum fós, I'm still learning Neelan Leafa fós. I'm not completely fluent, and that is a journey that I've been on for. Yeah, I learned it in school, but look, to be honest, I was sleeping in school the most time. I hate school. I went to school to sleep. Honestly, I hated it so much that it felt like a prison to me. Some people have a positive experience of school, but from the moment I stepped foot into it, my soul just said no. And anyways, I was forced into it. And look, I forgive my parents and everything else. But when I was in school, I did absorb things. Look, I was actually quite absorbent when I listened, but I I hated it so much I just went to sleep. So I picked up bits and pieces in school for sure. I had a bit of a foundation. I wasn't completely without it, but it was really, yeah, maybe a year or two or three after I left school, and I was in a ceremony in Wicklow, and there was Irish spoken in the ceremony. And when I went into that space and I heard the Gaeilge spoken, something woke up in my body that was very ancient, and I just knew that I had to learn it. And so, yeah, it's been a number of years of doing courses, and I'm still doing courses now. And I have a course in the Gaeltacht in October. I'll be going to in person, and yeah, it's a lifelong journey for me. The language is really important. It's a part of my connection with the land. It's a part of my connection with my own soul and my ancestors. So yeah, it's something I've come back to and had to learn myself, though.
Yeah, and like you practicing it daily, just like anything, is going to get you better at it. And it doesn't have to be perfect; it just has to be, again, use what you currently have. That's really, really important. And what I have, I suppose, down here, the idea is like we are both Irish, yet we're speaking. I'm going to say a foreign language in our own country when we are currently there. And the fact is, like, you had posts up about it. It was banned. It was something that was like beaten out of children. It was something that was literally frowned upon to speak it. And that's something that's terrible, and it actually didn't even happen that long ago.
It's all very new, and yeah, there's a phrase in Irish, Tirgan Changa Tirgan Anam, and that's a country without its language is a country without its soul. And that's really, yeah, it's so true to it. And we're so lucky at the time that we're in. Like, there's so much that was illegal in terms of just being Irish was illegal, to be honest. And you had the penal laws where it was illegal to be Catholic and to be a practicing Catholic. And, there was the likes of even bans on going and visiting holy wells or doing, we have what's called the tourists in the Irish tradition, which is the taking of a pilgrimage. And this is a very important part of our cultural heritage, and it goes back to pre-Christian times, although it lives on in the Christian faith nowadays. But like that was actually banned, to go around to our sacred sites and to go on these tourists, that was illegal because it gave the people power. So, there's so many things and cultural practices that we're engaging with today that were kept alive by people that did it in a time where, they could have been killed or, really harmed. And yeah, we're just very blessed to be in the time that we're in, and we're like emerging out of what I would call an age of darkness. And even though there's so much going on in the world, and we're very privileged to be in a place where it's safe and we're well and we have abundance and privileges and whatnot. And a lot of other parts of the world, that's not the case right now.
Yeah. If because you didn't go the typical route of everyone else, is there things that you've massively learned? Because again, you don't have to go to school to learn. You literally go outside, you listen to a podcast. Hopefully, there will be loads of golden nuggets in this. And what are the things that you, I suppose, learned yourself? That you were like, Jesus, I was never going to learn that in school. Right. So maybe a couple of those would be interesting for people and listeners to further hear about.
Yeah, I suppose the part of listening, learning to actually listen and observe nature and to learn from nature directly. So that we can read all the books in the world, and I'm a big fan of books. As I said, I love learning things. I'm, thirsty for knowledge and for learning. And I think we should all be always learning more and pushing ourselves in that way. But when I actually started my journey of going back to the forest, there was years where I actually didn't read any books. And in that time, I was just listening and observing, and I was learning through the doing. So, I believe that, our ancient ancestors, they didn't have books and stuff like that. They didn't have to do courses on things. They just did it. They just fucking did it. And I learned that about growing food when I went then and I lived on a hill fort. I built a little shack. Like a shack. It was kind of a bender tent out of hazel and willow, and I had a bit of canvas on it. And I built it. It was my 24th birthday. My dad gave me a hand with it, and it was funny because he's a bricklayer. He's a bricklayer. He's like a brick himself. He's he's a sturdy fella. He's a man of few words, but anyways, he gave me a hand building this shack on the ring fort. And we just made it up. We didn't know how to do that, but we just made it up. We just learned. We just moved with our bodies because the hands remember. That's something that I've learned, is that the hands remember how to do things because we have that epigenetic memory inside of us that for thousands of years we have been building, we have been creating, we have been growing, we have been connecting with this world and crafting what we need from our hands and from the materials of the earth. We just know that it's inside of us. But we're so bombarded with so many different things in the world and so disconnected that we don't get a chance to do that. So something I have learned is by being immersed in the environment, we are able to learn so much quicker. So when I was just on the land, I didn't ever learn how to grow food. I lived in Tala. There was bags of whatever being sold left, right, and center, and it was cans and whatever else. But people brought me trees and they brought me seeds, and all of a sudden all these tools started appearing, and I just worked the land and I just did it, and I learned. And I learned as I went, and I continue to learn as I go. And there's certain things that obviously getting guidance from someone that really knows what they're doing is important, but there's so much that lives inside us that is dormant, and that's just waiting to be woken up.
Yeah. And I suppose you have different courses that you do with, I'm going to say, people, different events even coming up, the deep root events. Tell me a little bit about that and further expand on that.
Yeah, so the Deep Roots Healing Across Waters gathering is hosted by myself and Ben, and Shannon is going to be there as well, a dear friend of mine that's also from Ireland, and Rosalie, and we're going to be I suppose weaving together different aspects of land and culture and ancestral connection. So we're based here, where I am now in Scotland, on this amazing land. It's in the hills of the Highlands. The hills are surrounding us completely, the mountains. And, you know, we have the river within a stone throw away, and that has salmon and trout. It's a really ancient landscape here. It's beautiful. The deer are here. There's owls. You have all these different plants and bog myrtle surrounding us everywhere, the birch woodland, the Scots pines, and the land itself is just enough as it is. But you know, within that, we're bringing people back together again on the land, in a culturally rooted way. So, you know, I know a lot of people, as they've woken up on their spiritual journey, they might look to other places. I did myself, you know, look to other cultures, in order to find that sense of belonging and spiritual connection. However, what we're doing is we're bringing people together and saying, look at what we have already, the likes of our Gaelic language and our songs and our stories, the likes of our plants and our folklore, and, you know, everything that surrounds us in the landscape. And there's such a rich diversity of medicine that lives here right beneath our feet and all around us, that's waiting for us to connect with it. So yeah, that's very much what Deep Roots is about. It's about coming into connection with who we are as a people, in belonging, in community, and exploring, yeah, what that looks like in today's world, where we have been severed from our roots and we have been severed from the land. You know, most people don't have access to land. And that's, you know, the limiting factor is that most of us don't own land, and we want to. And the people that actually know how to look after it don't have the land. So Deep Roots is an opportunity to come around the fire together, to grieve, maybe if people have grievances. You know, on this path, there's often a lot that comes up for people on the healing journey. There's also a space to celebrate, you know, and we have our summer solstice fire ceremony, and we'll do the bonfire dance, which is an ancient Irish ceilidh dance. I'll be instructing that. And we have the likes of eco printing crafts, and making your own seining bundles from the bog myrtle here, and yeah, lots of different things. So really, it's about bringing people back to the land and exploring, what does it mean to be in relationship with land and culture and place and community together.
Love it. And I suppose, is foraging part of those, like, different events that you do?
Yeah, surely. Yeah. Like foraging is just like a daily, you know, it's a daily part of life. And I think it's introducing that as well to people, that it doesn't have to be this thing where, you know, you become a forager. It is just something that is just woven into your daily life. Like you said, with your fennel, you went out and you just gathered a bit of it and you made a tea out of it. It doesn't have to be a big deal. You know, it's even like today, like if I can just like recommend one practice for people that maybe want to get interested in foraging, um and gathering wild foods. It's like, I woke up and, you know, I went and I was on my way to make my tea. I stay in the cabin up at the other end of the land. And on the way I stopped at the sorrel, you know, I stopped at the sorrel and I took a few little bits of sorrel and I just ate it. And I just enjoyed it for a minute, and I was like, isn't it so great for me to welcome the first thing into my body of the day is a wild plant, you know, and all the micronutrients, the phytonutrients, the minerals that are in wild plants that are just not in cultivated foods. So it's just like inviting wild food into our lives in little ways, you know, even throughout the day. If you have a dandelion patch in your garden, you know, before you eat a meal, to eat a dandelion green, it's going to stimulate your liver, help with digestion. You know, it's just these little things that we can do, little practices that you weave into your life that really change your overall well-being and your sense of connection. Because when you forage, you slow down and you connect, and your eyes kind of open. It's like opening ancient eyes, and you see the world and the environment in such a different way, and it connects you into that place in that moment in time. So
If you're such an amazing person, I literally could listen to you all day. Like, it is that thing because we'd be similar. We would go outside, we would look at the dandelion, and we would look at this one. How is it different from that one? And why it's underneath. I'm going to say a certain tree and all those different things. But a lot of people don't actually see those. And it's what I suppose you and I would love more people to do out the other side of it. It's something that getting them outside in the likes of nature is what people are actually missing. And it's the idea that, yeah, it's normal to me and you to grab fennel from the side of the road or wherever it may be, outside, and put it into a cup and or a bit of ginger. But for most people, they're a million miles away from that. They're buying something that they have no clue on connection to where it came from. It came in plastic, and they don't ever see the outside. They go from the bedroom to the likes of, I'm going to say, the kitchen, underfloor heating, to the office, back to the car that has heating on again, into the bed they go. And now we're in winter, they will just say, and they turn on the electric blanket. They're never exposed to outdoor elements and nature in itself. So that's, I suppose, something that people need to get back to.
Oh, people are very soft. I realized it when because I lived like very primitively for a number of years, and like, people used to say to me, "How are you doing it? And you're living in hardship and everything." And I'd say to them, "You have no idea. Like, you're living in hardship." Because like when I lived in a tent, at the beginning I lived in a tent and I just had the sleeping bag and whatnot, and I had someone gave me a sheepskin, and at one point I had a little stove at the side of the tent, and I was just the happiest ever. I just sat with the fire every day. I didn't have a smartphone for those 3 years. I just had a texting phone just for my own safety. And like I would just sit there with the fire and I would just listen to the birds. And I remember I just started to absorb the sound of that particular forest. It was like it just had a particular song, the way that the wind would sing through the different leaves in the trees, and that song began to sing through me, and it's like, and I'd be drawing my water from the well every day, and people are saying, "You're living in hardship," and I'm like, "Man, you are living in hardship." But then, yeah, so I lived for a number of years in this, it was quite primitive in its own way and rough way. After that, I didn't have any facilities either. I would just boil water in the over the fire in a big pot, and I'd like boil all different herbs for me to wash in, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But when I moved into a house, then I remember that it was a lovely house. It was on a big piece of land in Sligo, and it had its own waterfall, and it was magical. I grew food in the polytunnel, but being in that house, it started to deaden me. It started to my whole consciousness changed, and I started to become a bit sad. And I remember I had to just take off, I took off with a bag on my back and just a sleeping bag, and I went, on a bit of a journey across England. And along the way, I met this fella called Magnus in a stone circle. He was 19, he had hitchhiked all the way from Germany, the whole way, and he was surviving off £1 a day. And I met him. There was a spark and a twinkle in his eye, and it was just a destined meeting, in the stone circle. And we were both looking for somewhere to camp, and I pointed in the direction far away of where there was trees, and I said, "That's where I'm going to camp tonight. I might meet you there." So I went over there, and in that evening, then I was chatting away to him, and he was the person that I needed to meet, and I was the person he needed to meet. But I was telling him about all the different herbs he could forage and whatnot. But what he reminded me of was the simplicity and the wildness, because the wildness of life was in his eyes, and the brightness of life was in his eyes. And yet he had nothing but what was on his back, but he was living in the moment, and he was living connected with life and the opportunities that life bring. And that was a real reminder that I needed at that time, where even though I was living in this big, like it was actually a mansion that I was living in at the time, and there was so much abundance. The fella I lived with, he was quite wealthy, and it was, it was wealthy in ways, but it was void of that simplicity, which actually brings a lot of well-being. So anyways, I think that the world that we live in focuses on the wrong things. I think people focus more on what they can acquire, all this kind of materialism, which, material things are great. I love me bath and I love me shower now, and it's all grand to have comforts and all. But people focus on a lot of the wrong things, and that's why we live in a very sick world that has no real appreciation. People don't appreciate things anymore in the same way that they did before. And that's why I'm so passionate about getting back to the old ways, because, in times gone past, we had less and we appreciated more.
Yeah. And just on that point, I suppose the idea is I've done a bit of traveling similar to you in different countries, and one of these most unique places I've actually been has been Uganda. And out
Mhm.
on those, I suppose, escapades or those travels, literally, they have absolutely nothing. They have nearly less than nothing, right? They haven't shoes, they're playing with sticks. And when
Mhm.
I brought out a ball that I flat packed in a bag that's sitting over there and slid into the back, and I brought a pump and I pumped that up because they were kicking around rubbish, the
Yeah.
joy that they got from a
Yeah.
simple ball that they probably had never seen before. And oh, lad, I tell you, it bet on. They had no forks, they had no spoons. They wiped their backside with their left hand. They ate with their right. They had beans and rice, which they grew themselves. And
Mhm.
they were as happy as Larry.
Mhm. Oh, do you know, I love that. And that's the memory I have in my own heart is like of a simpler time where people are happier, you know? And I think so much of the world that we live in is because why people are sad and sick is because they're looking to these physical things to fill the hole that lives within them, which is void of connection. You know, the reality is most of us have been severed from what it is to actually be human and to be in relationship with life, to be in relationship with one another, to have good supportive families and relationships around us, to be in relationship with the land and place and culture and who we are and our belonging, right? And with that severance is a hole that lives within us. There's a real hole that lives in a lot of people, and that's where you have addictions and you have trying to fill that hole with fucking phones and cars and clothes and it's never enough, like it's never enough. And that's because it's like what we said, overfed and undernourished, and that speaks to so many different ways we're living our lives. And that's why I really don't like engaging with over materialism with the likes of my nieces and stuff, like getting them loads of presents or buying them loads of things, because I don't want to feed that part of them. I want to feed the part of them that knows that I'm present with them 100% when I'm there with them, and that I'm going to teach them and show them what I know and pass on my skills, and show them what plants to forage, and give them real experiences of life. Like, what they don't need more stuff. um and so this materialism, capitalistic beast that we all feed in some way or entangled in is the cause of most people's sickness. And when you speak to that situation there of, the people in Uganda and just the simplicity and the joy of that ball, that's really what we've lost within all of that, isn't it?
Massively. And if more people could go, and we don't have to go back to the Stone Ages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's more so to literally do a little bit and be a little bit more mindful of where your food comes from. I love that point you made, like of nourishing. Like nourishment is from connection. Nourishment isn't always from food, but it is also from food. But that's a real point to, I suppose, hone in on from the likes of this podcast. And said nourishment comes from meeting someone, and instead of doing the dating apps or doing whatever other social media reply, because we actually have lost touch with people. We think that a simple voice note or something along the lines of that, going back to the 90s, I suppose the generation that we would have grown up in, we used to cycle around and walk to the neighbour's house that had the back door open, that had the wallet on the kitchen table and the likes of the keys of the car. You go, hello, hello, and nobody there. And you go,
Yeah.
right, the Malays aren't around. That was one of my neighbours. And then went over to the Smiths, knocking on the door, went in, hello, nobody there again. That was it. But eventually someone was there, of course. But the idea was we've come to, I suppose, a way of living that is unconnected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a funny one, and I've reflected on this a good bit over the past few days because social media is something that is often villainized. It's like, oh, it's so bad, and this, that, and the other, and the internet is awful, and
Mhm.
that's all very true. Look, it has a dark side, but without it, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Yeah.
Like, and you know yourself, like you get a lot of your work from online, so do I. Like, we're able to generate our own income and business through that platform, and it gives a lot of sovereignty in that way. I mean, it's the algorithm, and you could go into lots of different things. It's the beast in itself. It is a bit of a goblin, the internet has a dark side, but we can also use it to our advantage. And it's linking a lot of us up with one another. It's like this web. It literally is the interweb, and it's giving us all an opportunity to actually connect with one another. But within that if you are not grounded in your own life and having real connection with real people and real experiences and the earth and everything else, you can get lost, and it is made to be addictive. So yeah, I think it's finding some kind of middle ground because, yeah, I spent those years without the internet and it was amazing. You know, I grew up with the internet because I was the age of that, you know, I'm 28. And yeah, I had the internet from really young. And then I went away from it for a few years when I lived in the forest and blah, blah, blah. And that was amazing. It was so good. And then I kind of got the message, you need to go online now and share what you've learned. And I was like, fuck, I don't want to go back online. But when I did, I got the phone and I was like, everything, like even putting music on and stuff, I was like, this is fucking amazing. I can just listen to songs. It was like I never had it before. You know, I was having this experience where everything, when I get in the shower, I'd press the button, I'd be like, oh, hot water is just coming out of this thing. And I'd like turn the light on. I'd be like, oh my God, this light is just turning on. You know, we kind of take everything for granted. We don't see the magic in it. And for me, there is a magic in the internet as well, you know, and it's about connecting in with the magic of it, not getting lost and finding the connection through it, but not relying on it for connection. And I think that's the healthy middle ground that I am always trying to dance with, which is difficult because as I said, these things are made to be addictive.
Yeah, and they are, and true, as you touched on, like I'm Mr. Social Media. I post every single day. I really enjoy it. I make it huge.
You're real.
You stop.
You're so funny, man. Honestly.
I just try and pass on information. This is why I'm on, why I have my own business, I suppose, now, because when I was my first decent job, proper job, was a landscaper, and it was so boring and it was so tough. It was just digging holes, calling man, there's the hole for the fence, dig the hole every 6 feet, dig a hole. And I was like, if I'm in charge, I'm going to make jobs way more entertaining, and I'm just going to enjoy doing it. So then I got qualified as organic horticulture, started growing, and then I had people kind of working for me or helping me out during the summer months. It was really busy, and they were like, "Jeez, it's great working here." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's really hard work." They're like, "Oh yeah, it is really hard work. Like we're up piss o'clock and we're going to bed at early o'clock, and then we're getting up again to do it again." But I was want people to realize that you can do things that are hard work and make it entertaining and make it enjoyable if you have the right type of people around you. I suppose that's the whole point of this podcast, like connection to growing, connection to land, doing things that sort of give you health. It would be all things of my ethos, and that's what I share on social media. And I definitely wouldn't banish social media, but there's a lot of SH1T on it between the beauty products of collagen something or other, when like you just eat foods that contain collagen, whether it's bone broth and or high vitamin C food, which is every dark leafy green, which you can forage yourself for free, or you can literally pay for a fortune for it in a little tablet. So that's the joys as well as the pitfalls in relation to social media in itself. If I'm just conscious of your time as well. I want you to share where people can best reach out to you and or book into any other events that are coming up, whether it's, I'm going to say, in June or the likes of July. So put down here in the likes of, I'm going to say, your comments in relation to what's your Instagram name, if you have Facebook, if you have a website, anything at all, I'll pop it in here.
Do you want me to stick it in the chat there? Or
No,
something?
no, I'll do that. You just tell me verbally, and I'll put it in the show notes. Don't you worry.
Very good. Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, which is Aoife Dedanen, AoifeDedanan. You can also look up my website, which is Slína Sinsear, which means the path or the way of the ancestors. That's SLINASINSEAR, and that'll be .com. And yeah, you can see what I'm doing also with the Sheelan Collective. That'll all be on my Instagram and everything. And yeah, if you wanted to catch us out here in Scotland, we have our Deep Root Summer Solstice gathering. There's a handful of places left for that in 2 weeks, and that's from the 19th to the 23rd of June. And then we also have the Salmon of Wisdom retreat, which is going to be an amazing experience, immersion into the myth of the salmon of knowledge. And yeah, we're going to be working with ancestral skills, primitive fishing, tanning fish skin, making salmon leather. Yeah, really journeying into the myth and the druidry and the dream craft of the story, connecting in with mugwort, tracking the landscape, foraging and everything else. That's the 11th to the 15th of July. So yeah, hopefully we catch a salmon and we'll be able to cook it up on the fire and whatnot.
Amazing. Jeez, tell you, if I'm nearly available, I'd nearly go myself. I have never, I'm going to say, caught a wild salmon myself. And that's something actually I was previous. I think that's where we first contacted, I'd say, talking about fish and wild fish in Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
I think way back a couple of years ago. But yeah, so if anyone is interested in any of those different events, make sure you check out Aoife's page. I'll tag it all below here in the links to the show notes. But Aoife, thanks so much for your wealth of knowledge, your great crack, and that's what's really important, right? Or that I always end these podcasts by saying, stay tuned, stay classy, and keep it organic.